Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. Before you today, we have a rezone and preliminary subdivision plat request for property known as Ridgeview Estates Second Edition. So just to give you a little bit of background before we get started, basically in 2012, the subject property was annexed into the city of Moscow, basically retained its current land use designation, and that was auto-urban residential, and was rezoned from the suburban residential zone to the low-density single-family residential zoning district, which is our R1 designation. Also included was a preliminary subdivision plat proposal, basically to subdivide the property into 36 single-family residential lots, which ranged in size from about 9,600 square feet to 15,485 square feet in size. That annexation, comp plan, designation, adoption, and rezone were approved by City Council, and that happened on July 16th of 2012. Subsequently, the preliminary plat was also approved, which happened on July 16th as well, with 12 conditions. And just for the council's benefit, I've attached that relevant criteria and standards document from 2012, which basically laid out those 12 conditions. So the applicant ended up not deciding to move forward with that proposal and go to the final plat stage, and has since decided to amend their proposal and start from the beginning of the subdivision plat process. And that basically brings us to today. So the applicant's request includes two components, and the first is to rezone the property from the originally rezoned designation of R1 to a combination of R1, R2, which is moderate density residential, as well as a small portion of R3, which is our medium density residential zone. Also part of the proposal is a preliminary subdivision plat to subdivide the property into 42 residential lots. And those lots are proposed to range in size from 7,000 square feet to a little over 14,000 square feet in size. Now, the staff recommends that the council conduct two separate public hearings tonight. Like Mayor Lambert had mentioned, first for the rezoning, as well as second for the preliminary subdivision plat for Ridgeview Estates Second Edition. So just to orient yourself to the subject property, once again, it's in the middle of your screen, outlined in red. You've got the current city limits boundary, which is the orange dashed line that runs along the eastern property boundary. You've got Notting Hill Drive, or the future extension of Notting Hill Drive within Southgate 3rd Edition, coming into the property from the north. You have a current extension of Ridgeview Drive here to the west, as well as Wild Rose Drive. And you also have a point of access on State Highway 8, Troy Highway. So you have about 4 points of access to this particular piece of property. The subject property is surrounded by residential developments. You have Ridgeview Estates First Edition to the west, which is in our R1 designation. You also have lands within the county to the south as well as to the east, which are predominantly residential. You also have some mobile home parks as well as an RV park to the south of Latah Trail there to the south. This is a topography map showing contour lines on this property. Each black line represents 2 feet of elevation change, sloping to the north, gaining elevation to the north. Every red line represents 10 feet of elevation change, so you can tell a little bit steeper slopes on that northern portion and flattening out on the southern portion adjacent to Troy Highway. Taking a look at our comprehensive plan land use designation, currently designated as auto-urban residential, as it was in 2012. You have lands outside of the city within the area city impact to the east as well as to the south, which are currently within that auto-urban residential designation as well. You have a small swath, which is the Latah Trail, Paradise Path, which is currently designated as parks and open space. Those subdivisions to the north and to the west are currently designated as neighborhood conservation. What the comp plan tells us about the auto-urban residential designation: those areas are generally anticipated to be developed for low to moderate density residential uses, and that's densities ranging between 3 to 7 units per acre. And the appropriate current zoning for AUR designated areas include R1, R2, as well as R3, which are your proposals tonight. So brings us to the current zoning map of that property in the area. Once again, outside the city and the area city impact to the east, you have an R1 classification. To the south, you have an R4, which is multiple family residential. To the west and the north, you have a continuation of the R1 designation. The proposal before you today for the rezone, basically to rezone the southern half of that property, a combination of the moderate density R2 residential as well as the medium density residential to the very south adjacent to Troy Highway. We would be leaving the R1 classification on the northern half of the property. Looking at what our R1, R2, and R3 zones mean, the R1 zone is a low-density residential zone, and that's appropriately applied where the following circumstances are present, where it's predominantly single-family dwellings, where the physical character of those areas does not lend itself to more intense development, either by virtue of irregular topography, restricted access, division of land into subdivision lots of a size greater than the minimum lot size required by this zoning district, or the application of the comprehensive plan policies to the land in question. Our R2 zoning district is appropriate also where single-family dwellings exist. The terrain is not harshly or irregular, and smaller lot sizes can be accommodated without extensive earthwork, and utilities and other public facilities are adequate for densities allowed. Also, the existing lot development patterns and policies embodied within the comprehensive plan also guide the application of this zoning district. That brings us to the R3 zone, which provides for an increase over the density allowed in the R2 by permitting different types of housing construction. It's appropriate where activity levels are moderate, terrain permits construction of somewhat larger structures, and where public systems and neighborhood facilities can accommodate a greater intensity of land uses as guided by the comprehensive plan. And so once again, that's R3 zones proposed to be adjacent to Troy Highway on the southern end of the lot. So allowed uses within the R3 zone include single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, twin homes, townhouses, and looking at the commonly observed densities of that zone, it's usually around 7 to 14 units per net acre. This brings us to our proposed subdivision plat before you today. As you can see, we have the extension of Notting Hill coming in from the north. We've got the extension of Ridgeview Drive here to the west coming into the subdivision. You also have Wild Rose Drive here to the west, which extends through the proposed subdivision and terminates on the eastern property boundary to allow for future connection for undeveloped property to the east. Also have a cul-de-sac street, which is Cypress Court, here at the southern end of the property. I'd also like to point out it includes a linear stormwater swale with acoustical plantings, and that would be this parcel right here. So all the stormwater would be directed, collected, and conveyed through that proposed stormwater swale with acoustical plantings. So 42 residential lots, and these range in size from 7,000 to 14,000, a little over 14,000 square feet in size. Looking at the lot count, the total number of R1 lots is 19, total number of R2 is 17, and you just have 6 R3 lots, which are down here at the southern end. And I'd like to note that this, at the end of Cypress Court cul-de-sac here, this would be our proposed parkland parcel, as well as a 8-foot wide pathway which runs adjacent to the linear stormwater parcel to the south. Once again, we have that street system extension of Ridgeview, Wild Rose, Notting Hill. Ridgeview Drive and Notting Hill Drive are proposed to be 34-foot wide streets. Wild Rose and Cypress Court are proposed to be 28-foot wide streets. All are proposed to have curb gutter, tree lawn, sidewalks on both sides of the streets. A traffic impact study has been conducted by the applicant to see what effect the proposed development would have on the highway system. And the results of that traffic impact study is that an eastbound left turn bay on State Highway 8, Troy Highway, is warranted as part of this development proposal. Looking at our water and sewer system, water services are proposed to be extended via existing water and sanitary mains, which are currently located within Ridgeview Drive, Wild Rose Drive, as well as Notting Hill Drive. It's anticipated that under commonly observed household water use within the city, which is about 114 gallons per day per occupant, that the proposed development could be reasonably anticipated to use about 3.9 million gallons of water per year. Also, there's also existing sanitary sewer main, which is located along the north side of Troy Highway, which is currently part of the Southeast Sewer District. And then once again, storm sewer would be directed towards that linear stormwater swale, and then it's basically discharged to an existing drainage way towards the South Fork of the Palouse River to the south. Just wanted to go over the parkland dedication requirements of this proposed subdivision. Contains approximately 9 acres of net developable land, so this is excluding the streets within that calculation. Looking at our R1 and R2 zones, those require 5% net developable area. Our R3 zone requires 7%. So accordingly, the parkland requirement is 0.487 acres or 21,216 square feet. Now the applicant's proposal is the parkland at the southwest corner, the parkland parcel, which is about 13,970 square feet in size. You also have the 8-foot wide pathway, which is a little under 5,000 square feet in size. So basically results in a 2,256 square foot deficit or $700 fee in lieu of. On top of that, the applicant has agreed to grade and hydroseed the park parcel, and that's estimated at about $2,500. So just wanted to go over a little bit. Staff received some questions today from some council members about counting the linear stormwater swale pathway as parkland. And I just wanted to point out, if the council is concerned, another option is the fee in lieu of, which is $2,224, and that's not counting the 4,984 square foot park parcel, the pathway, excuse me. So that would basically be the 21,216 minus the 13,976. That gets you the result of 7,240 square feet. And so based upon our $13,500 per acre fee in lieu of, it would come out to be $2,224, which is a couple $100 less than what the applicants agreed to do in grading and hydroseeding of that park parcel. So just wanted to go over that briefly. And we have Parks and Rec staff have indicated that this proposal is acceptable for meeting their dedication requirements, and Dwight Curtis is here to answer any questions you may have about that. So brings us to the rezone recommendation. Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct a public hearing, and that happened on May 14th, 2014, and they recommended approval of the rezone request with no conditions. So staff's recommendation before you today is to conduct a public hearing upon the proposed rezone, and upon consideration of any testimony presented, approve the proposed rezone ordinance under suspension of the rules, requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that they be read by title and published by summary. That brings us to the preliminary subdivision plat recommendations, and basically Planning and Zoning Commission had also reviewed this and conducted a public hearing on that same date, and basically had 15 conditions recommending approval as well. So staff's recommendation is to conduct a public hearing upon the proposed preliminary subdivision plat, and upon consideration of any testimony presented, approve the preliminary plat for Ridgeview Estates second with 15 conditions recommended by staff. And so Planning and Zoning Commission, like I had mentioned earlier, recommended approval with those 15 conditions. There is one condition that they did not carry over from staff's recommendation, and I will note that as I go through these recommended conditions. So first brings us to stormwater detention facility. The applicant shall be required to conduct a detailed stormwater discharge analysis to include any mitigation actions necessary to ensure that the stormwater facility shall have no downstream adverse impacts subject to the approval of the city engineer. Second one, under stormwater, the applicant shall prepare a revised linear stormwater swale design which meets City of Moscow stormwater swale design standards, subject to the approval of the city engineer as well. And lastly, the applicant shall prepare a landscape plan to be submitted with the final plat and subject to city approval for access to the stormwater facility and maintenance considerations. Brings us to the street system recommendations, the first one being that the applicant shall extend curbing sidewalks from their current terminus within Ridgeview First Edition into the proposed subdivision. This is where Planning and Zoning Commission deviated from our recommendations. They had stated that condition that the applicant shall extend curbing and sidewalks from the east side of the temporary turnarounds which are located on the south side of Wild Rose Drive as well as Ridgeview Drive, into the proposed subdivision. So basically,
Can you easily flip to a mapping of that